I first learned about Tanner Bishop when I played in a youth basketball league. He went to a different high school than I did. Our teams met on Saturdays at the boys' club. He was one of those kids who grew up early and was 5 or 6 inches taller than the rest of us. Upon reflection, I decided that my team did pretty well against Tanner's team. The difference in talent was obvious. I also noticed that as soon as Tanner's team got ahead, he would start goofing around, showing off, passing from behind, throwing three-pointers, etc. We came back, and while the end result was not in doubt, we made it a little more competitive than it really should have been. We ended up at the same high school and both played football our freshman year. That's when I officially met Tanner. As I suspected, Tanner was big, athletic, and popular on the football field. Naturally, he was a quarterback. I, on the other hand, tried out for the running back position. Our coach used a two-fullback system. We had a guy on our team named Nat Whitfield, who was the fastest at the running back position. I was the second fastest. I wasn't as fast as Nat, but I blocked well, protected Tanner when he passed, was a decent runner, and could catch a pass coming out of the backfield. Where Tanner was bright, I was steady. On defense, Tanner was an average halfback and I played fullback. Many times while playing defense, he would try to make a spectacular save and I would have to cover him from the fullback position. We were pretty good, and I started to get close to a group of players. Of course, the center of that group was Tanner. They say opposites attract, and although Tanner and I had a lot in common, personality-wise, we were almost opposites. He was a loud, popular, outgoing guy. I, on the other hand, was a bit of an introvert, staid, and certainly not flamboyant. But somehow we became good friends. Tanner was smart, but not always attentive. More than once, I shared my notes with him or tutored him at the last minute to help him with an upcoming test. Usually, the reason for his inattentiveness in class was some girl. The payback for helping him study was my social presence in Tanner's solar system. After school, at lunch, and at school dances, a crowd of girls and boys always gathered around Tanner. I was drawn into this social circle. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't a nerd. But compared to Tanner, we all looked a little pale in comparison. Through this socializing, I became a member of the popular crowd. For the first few years of high school, none of us had a girlfriend. We did all the social stuff that happens in high school, but we didn't have permanent life partners. That all changed in junior high. Out of the blue, and I'm still not sure how it started, Tanner had a girlfriend, Anne-Marie Dubois. Anne attended St. Cecilia Catholic School on the other side of town. The fact that she attended a Catholic school and not our school gave her a certain local exoticism. This exoticism was aided by her appearance as well. Anna was of average height, about 5 feet 7 inches. She had dark, almost black hair. She had olive skin and an attractive heart-shaped face. Slightly almond-shaped eyes and full lips. Very pretty, but it was her body that impressed me. Slender, with a slim waist and athletically strong physique. Homecoming was approaching, and Tanner was clearly in love with the beautiful Anna. I didn't have a date. One day, a week or so before the dance, Tanner and I were sitting in the cafeteria. "Max, do you have a date for next week's dance?" Tanner asked me. I sensed he was on to something. Although I considered him a close friend, perhaps my best friend, his interest in my well-being was rarely expressed out loud. It was a little unusual that he inquired about my status for the dance. "No, nothing yet," I told him. We had a lot of great girls we went to school with, but none of them stood out to me. "In that case, Anna has a friend, Mia. She's really nice and isn't dating anyone right now," Tanner told me. "Tanner, I don't know her. I've never met her. She doesn't know me," I told him. "But what does she look like?" I asked. I guess I was curious. It turned out that Mia Battle was also a junior at St. Cecilia's school. Whereas Anna was athletically built and taller, Mia was petite. If Anna was a gorgeous little girl, Mia could most likely be described as cute. Small, slender, and cute. We first met at McDonald's. Tanner and I came in together. Mia came with Anna. I guess physically I passed some kind of test with Mia, and she certainly did too. The following Saturday, we went to the prom in the company of Tanner and Anna. Now, in the evening after the dance, I told Mia that I had a good time. She replied that she had too. I liked her. She was fun and funny, and the fact that she went to a different school gave her a certain mystique about our school. I found out through Tanner that she liked me too. We started dating. St. Cecilia's school was having a Christmas ball. I guess since it was a religious school, they were allowed to not talk about Christmas. In our politically correct high school, any December performances had to be called winter performances. Nevertheless, at St. Cecilia's school, it was a big celebration, and Tanner and I were invited to the dance. The dance was not in some crappy high school gym, but in the ballroom of the Hilton Hotel downtown. We entered the ballroom, Tanner, Anna, Mia, and I was not prepared for the hostility from the men attending St. Cecilia's. We were treated as if we were a raid of marauders from another village intent on stealing their women. We were made a few remarks as we passed by, and I didn't see a single friendly male face. I was dancing with Mia, and this guy, dark-haired and stocky, was in the way of my dancing. I politely gave Mia a place in the dance. After 2 dances, she joined me at our table. Later, we were dancing again, and the same guy tried to interfere again. "Michael, I'm dancing with my boyfriend Max," she said. "I already danced with you." "Another dance, me?" he asked, and tried to move over, pushing me slightly but also staring at Mia. "Hey," I said and pushed him away. "She doesn't want to dance with you," I told him. With those words, Michael turned to me with anger and malice in his eyes and punched me in the chin. For a second, I saw stars, but I didn't fall. Before he could hit me again, I grabbed him and pulled him to the ground. Mia screamed at both of us, and then Michael's buddies intervened. I felt my arms being grabbed and pulled away. He got one good kick in the leg as I was pulled away from him. Now 2 of Michael's buddies were holding my hands, and he still had the same angry look in his eyes as he moved towards me. And that's when Tanner intervened. I told him that Tanner was one of the biggest guys in school. He was still just as big and authoritative now. He pushed Michael away with force and ordered Michael's buddies to let me go. At that moment, one of the chaperones came up as well. The fight, if it could be called that, was officially over. The chaperones conferred, and I noticed one of Michael's buddies talking to one of the chaperones, probably one of the parents. The adult nods in agreement. The gist of the incident is this. Tanner and I were kicked out of the dance. Any protests we tried to make were quickly quashed. They have home field advantage. Mia and Anna kindly leave with us. As we walk out, I hear Michael say, "See you later, tough guy." We meet glances as all 4 of us leave the ballroom. I'm not used to having enemies. Even on the sports fields, I try to be a good sport and shake my opponent's hand, no matter how sharp the games get. It's a new experience. Tanner and Anna laugh as we walk out. Mia snuggles up to me hostess-like as we all walk out of the Hilton. "It's early, and we're not full from the dance," Tanner declares. "Let's go to Bernie's Cafe." We pile into a booth at the cafe and talk a little about the dance. "Max, thanks for protecting me," Mia tells me, giving me a hug. Tanner and Anna laugh at the fight. "You really showed them, Tiger," Tanner comments with a laugh. "Who was that asshole?" he asked. "Just some guy," Mia replied. "A little more than just some guy," Anna added. Then she told us the whole story. This guy, Michael Amici, had been Mia's boyfriend for most of her sophomore year. Over the summer, she caught him with another girl and they broke up. He's been trying to get Mia back ever since. "Let's not talk about Michael," Mia interjected. "You're my boyfriend now," Mia declared, snuggling up to me on the cafe bench. Boyfriend. Apparently all it took was pushing some guy, getting punched, and now my status had changed from dating to boyfriend. Meeting Michael Amici seemed to have made an impression on Mia. She became more attentive and seemed happy to be with me. For a while we sat and ate and chatted. I hadn't spent so much time around Anna before. I noticed that, aside from her looks, she was also a sweet and considerate person. She inquired if I was bruised from the fight and looked concerned. I assured her that I was fine. We ended up having a good time. Even though we got kicked out of the dance, we still had fun. I also realized how much I liked Mia. That night, I saw a different side of her. A good side. I may have started to fall in love with her. And I could also tell that her feelings for me were growing too. I know. Just an innocent high school romance, but it was much deeper than that for me. As the weeks went by, I quickly realized that my time with Mia was the best moments. In addition to enjoying my time with Mia, our relationship was growing as well. I got to know her family, and she got to know mine. We did the usual relationship stuff, dinners with her family, events with mine, double dates with Tanner and Anna, and lots of all the fun stuff normal to a relationship. We also talked about the future. Junior year of high school, college preparations began. Taking exams, applying, and visiting college campuses. In my mind, our relationship was an integral part of the future. Perhaps for Mia, those thoughts weren't as strong. I was an only child. My parents and I were very close. We weren't a big, close-knit family. My dad had one sister who lived near us. My mom's family was from the Midwest, and we didn't see them very often. My dad had his own insurance agency, John Early Insurance. That summer, I started working in his office from 8 in the morning until noon, 3 days a week. The other 2 days of the work week, I helped out at my Aunt Helen's house. Aunt Helen never married and lived in an old house with a huge lot that had belonged to my grandparents in what had once been a suburb. The city limits crossed Helen's lot many years ago. New neighborhoods had grown up around it. Her house stood in the center of a large multi-acre lot. Many developers were interested in this valuable piece of land. Helen had no intention of selling it. I was close to Aunt Helen, but she was strange. She was always whispering or humming something, but there was always some kind of noise coming from her. I was used to it, but it was pretty weird. With all that land, there was always something to do. When I came over to help, she would hand me a to-do list for the day. She was always nice, pleasant, and I could tell she liked me, but she never paid me a dime or thanked me when I finished a job. She always gave me an ice cream sandwich before she left. That was it. One day, coming back from Aunt Helen's, I said to Dad, "She never pays me anything." "Don't worry, you'll get paid," Dad told me. I wondered what he meant. Between working in Dad's office, helping Aunt Helen, and playing football on my own, my summer was full. But I still had time for Mia. I tried to see her every night if possible, but it was usually a few times a week. In retrospect, things were good with Mia and I, they just weren't developing. At the end of the summer, before football practice started, my family took a 2-week trip to California. We went there every year. This year, I was less excited. I'm going to miss Mia. As soon as we got back from vacation, football practice started. Tanner and I drove to practice together, and I realized we hadn't seen much of him over the summer. "How's Anna?" I asked him as I drove home on Monday. "She's fine," Tanner answered me nonchalantly. "What?" I replied. "When did it happen? Why didn't you tell me why?" I peppered him with questions. I was in shock at the whole thing. "Easy, Max," Tanner chuckled, looking at my confusion. "Hey, we're going to be seniors. I didn't want to be tied up in my last year of high school." He explained. "But damn, Tanner," I said. "Anna is beautiful and so sweet. She's perfect," said I. "Wow," he said. "I guess Max has a little crush on Anna?" He looked around and smiled at me. "Tanner," I said. "It's not like that. It's just that you two are perfect for each other. I thought you and Anna had been dating for a while." I told him. "Max, we're in high school," he said. "High school relationships like that don't last long. There are a lot of girls out there. Sure, Anna is great, but we're too young to settle down. About 10 years from now, maybe." "But not now," he explained. I mulled over his words in silence as we drove home. I thought about Tanner and all those girls. I thought about Mia and our future. And I was also thinking about the beautiful Anna. I picked Mia up Saturday night after her first full week of football. I hadn't had time alone with her since my parents and I had gone to California. I couldn't wait to spend time with her. Mia seemed happy to see me, just a little reserved. Probably after the separation, I thought. We drove around town and chatted about my vacation and going back to school. Pretty innocent. After I drove her home, I couldn't escape the thought that things were a little off. Maybe we'd just been apart for too long. Maybe we need to regroup a little, I thought. I spent the next week calling and trying to get our relationship back on track, but something was still not right. I asked her what was wrong. "I've just been busy going back to school and stuff," she replied. "My mom is driving me crazy." She added. "I see," said I, still feeling like something else had happened. "So can we go out Saturday night?" I asked, trying to solidify our date. "Well, I don't know," she replied. "I guess so. I'll let you know." That was the end of it. Before I could ask any more questions, she somehow excused herself and got off the phone. We were definitely not back to normal. Saturday morning, there was still no word from Mia. I called once, but there was no answer. I decided that I would drive straight to her house at the usual time. The door was opened by her mom. I always got along with Mrs. Battle. She looked at me with a puzzled expression on her face. Max? She asked. Hello, Mrs. Battle, I replied. Mia's not home, Max, she said to me. She had a confused look on her face, like she wanted to tell me something, thought about it, and decided to keep quiet. I'll tell Mia you stopped by. And with those words, she closed the door. I didn't miss the pitying expression on her face as the door closed. During Maya and Mia's relationship, one thing we always managed to do was communicate. If I texted her, she responded quickly. When we talked about problems, difficulties, minor mishaps, and things like that, we always discussed them. But now it was different. She was shutting me out. For a few minutes, I just sat in the car. The Maya I knew and who had become so close to me wouldn't treat me like this. We talked about the future. We talked about aligning our college plans. In some cases, we also talked about a future together after college. Career, home, marriage, and even children. Obviously, something was changing. I just didn't know what it was. Eventually, I left and headed home. I was in a daze. I told myself I wouldn't call her again and again. As much as I wanted to know what was going on, I wouldn't be the pathetic, desperate guy who sacrifices his manhood. I told myself I wouldn't contact her until I got my first call from her. I pondered all of her actions, signs, unspoken feelings. Unfortunately, the logical conclusion was that we were breaking up. She just didn't have the decency to formalize the breakup. Our first football game was on Friday against Roosevelt. During practice that week, it was like I was in a fog. I wasn't concentrating, I wasn't playing aggressively, I was on the verge of staying on the bench. Somehow, I mustered enough energy to keep playing, but with difficulty. We won the game, but it was a lot closer than it should have been. Roosevelt wasn't very good. I definitely didn't play well. I was supposed to be the brains of the defense. Poor execution on my part contributed to the game being very close. Over the next week, I received minimal texts from Mia. I was tired of the "what's going on, are you upset, as etc." questions. I promised myself that I wouldn't whine or beg her to talk to me. She just insisted she was busy. The next week, we lost a football game to the Regis team. We should have beaten them by 2 touchdowns. After all, we beat them 34-10 last year. No matter how I analyzed the game, the reason for the loss was my poor play. Our next opponent was St. Cecilia High School. The St. Cecilia Crusaders were a well-known athletic powerhouse. It was a private school and they were recruiting talented players. Our team, Washington, had a bit of a rivalry with the Crusaders. I wondered if Mia would be at the game. Over the past week, our communication had pretty much stopped. We started the game and they scored almost immediately, but at the end of the first quarter, we led 7-7. Their offense was led by the league's best quarterback, Gabriel Dante. Their running back was Michael Ameche, the same guy I got in a fight with at the Christmas party. Ameche was a muscular, straightforward runner. The Crusaders scored early in the second quarter. Our offense could do nothing against the tough Crusaders' defense. The quarter was coming to an end, and the Crusaders' offense took the lead. On our 9-yard line, the first field goal was scored. We all thought Dante would throw a pass, but instead, Ameche tied the game. Tanner was on a double team, so he was offside. I saw Ameche's pass. After hesitating a bit, I moved to fill the gap. Ameche tilted his head as our eyes met and ran right through me, scoring a touchdown. As I lay on the lawn, a jubilant Ameche ran up to me and stood over me, scattering trash. "Hey, tough guy," he hummed. "Not so tough now. Nice grip. I'm sure Mia enjoyed watching that game. Tough guy?" he added with a laugh as his teammates surrounded him. Mia, I thought to myself. What does this have to do with Mia? It was halftime in the locker room and we were losing 21-7. Tanner stood up and addressed the team. We played like crap the first half of the game, he proclaimed. We're better than this. This team is not that good. Stay focused, and we will win. He continued. Don't let this team outplay us. And with that comment, he looked right at me. I lowered my head, unable to look him in the eye. The point was clear. Ameche had literally run me over, and just as we were getting ready to leave the locker room to start the second half, Tanner grabbed me and pulled me aside. Max, you need to get your head out of your ass and focus, he told me. I started nodding in passive agreement. This time he pushed me towards the lockers and looked me straight in the eye. You know Mia is back with Ameche, Tanner told me. He wants to humiliate you in front of her. Now you have a choice. You can be in love and feel sorry for yourself. Or you can let Ameche know he's into football. Max, you're the smartest guy I know. Focus, for God's sake, he said to me. And with those words, he joined the team on the field. His words lodged deeply in my brain. I was moping as Mia went back to Michael Ameche. And here's Ameche running right at me and taunting me. And all I did was feel sorry for myself. A new emotion blossomed deep inside me as I ran out for the second half. It was anger. Anger at myself, at the Crusaders, at Ameche, but most of all at Mia. We scored right away at the start of the second half, and then it seemed like neither team could continue the offense. About halfway through the third quarter, I saw that the Crusaders had lined up in an unusual formation. I memorized it from the videotape of the game. I quickly told Nat, our cornerback, to go one-on-one with Perkins, their wide receiver. I'll cover him, I told him. He looked at me, eyes wide, and nodded. As Perkins and Nat rushed past me, I sped up and moved toward the flat surface. And lo and behold, just like on the tape, Ameche stepped out onto the flat surface. Dante's pass was a little high, and Ameche had to bounce a little, but he caught the ball. Meanwhile, I was quickly approaching him from my position as a free defender. Everything around me slowed down, even though I was moving at full speed. I could see Ameche jumping and following the ball as he moved to catch it. Instinct was telling me to hit it lower. Last time, the ball flew over me when I hit higher. I won't do that again. I saw that his left foot was firmly on the turf, and all my weight was on that foot, holding it up for a moment. I lunged at that left foot at full speed. It didn't stand a chance. The first sound I heard was the crack of breaking bone and the crunch of cartilage, followed by Ameche's scream. Ameche lost his balance, and I quickly scooped up the ball and ran 57 yards for a touchdown. As I ran toward my teammates, I looked back at the stands of St. Cecilia High School. I saw a dark-haired Mia looking at me with tears in her eyes. Unable to resist, I smiled at her. Ameche was carried off the field on a stretcher. This seemed to snatch the life from St. Cecilia's. The final score was 35-24 Washington. As we lined up to shake hands, there were a few angry comments. Last in line was a guy who I knew was Ameche's buddy. I couldn't help it, I was still so angry. Hey Jordan, I turned to Ameche's buddy. Tell Michael I hope he gets better soon, I said with obviously contrived sincerity. Screw you, asshole, was all the guy said. Despite my bravado during the game, I was deeply hurt by Mia's betrayal. I had a horrible feeling that it would be a long time before things got better. They say the opposite of love is indifference, but not for me. It was hate. Senior year of high school flew by, as did 4 years of college. I had always planned to work with my dad at an insurance office. I majored in finance. Many of my friends and classmates changed their majors in college. I, on the other hand, knew what I was going to do, and that brought me a certain amount of satisfaction. Throughout high school and college, I never had a serious girlfriend. The experience with Mia left a scar in me. I had been betrayed. I put so much emotion and energy into our relationship, and then she cheated on me. She didn't even have the decency to properly break up with me. I learned not to trust women. I never talked to her to find out what happened. Tanner had briefly told me that she and Ameche had started hanging out over the summer, and things had gone their separate ways since then. I couldn't understand it. Perhaps that was why I hadn't had a serious relationship with anyone in college. I was afraid of the pain of betrayal. The only satisfaction I got was the realization that I had completely ruined Michael Ameche's chances of playing college football. True, I saw him once, and he was walking with a limp. Good. Speaking of college football, Tanner got a scholarship to play football at a small college in Texas. He and I rarely socialized in college, but when we did, it was just like old times. Tanner decided to major in construction management. I graduated from college with a bachelor's degree in finance and dove headfirst into work. My father had a solid business, and I began networking with some of his clients. I was hardworking, sincere, and tried to be an individual. I saw that I had a very good future ahead of me at John Early Insurance. Then tragedy came to our family. At the age of just under 60, Aunt Helen passed away quietly in her sleep one April night. Her heart had failed. It was a sad time for us. We were not a large family. At holidays and celebrations, it was usually just mom and dad, Aunt Helen and me. Now her quirky personality, which we all loved, began to be missed. A few weeks after her death, Dad and I met with Helen's attorney. For some reason, Dad insisted that I accompany him to this meeting. Helen had a small investment account that she had left to my father. But the surprise in her will was that her house and all 9.7 acres of prime real estate went to me. To say I was shocked is an understatement. As we were leaving the law office, my father put his arm around my shoulders and said, "Remember how you once told me that Aunt Helen never paid you for all your help?" He asked. I nodded affirmatively. "Well, son, I think you just got paid," he told me. I had inherited not only the house and land, but all of Aunt Helen's belongings. Now I appreciated the house from a completely different perspective. Before, it had always been Aunt Helen's house, with flowery curtains, cabinets filled with china, and lace doilies. Now it was mine. It was far from a bachelor pad. I had a job. Between owning a house and working at an insurance agency, I was busy. One thing I noticed at work was that my father continued to do what he had been doing for the past 25 years. Times were changing rapidly in the financial products industry, and while my father would likely be serving his clients until his retirement, in order for the business to thrive and grow, we had to be prepared for change. One of the first things I did was to take a thorough look at our office. It was outdated. The windows flaunted old, wide beige Venetian blinds. On the glass front door hung a small cardboard clock with moving hands signaling our return. Straight out of the 60s. I thought one of the important things was to make a favorable first impression. The landscaping in front of the front door was very dated. A large area overgrown with bark with cracks in the cement walkway. Pressure-treated porch with outdated wooden railing. On either side of the front door stood two bright brass-covered colonial lanterns. Neither of them pointed straight up. The whole thing looked old-fashioned and cheap. It was the first thing I had to do to update the business. We needed to create a different first impression. I called several landscape architects to take a look, give their thoughts, and suggest a design. To my surprise, when the second of the three landscape firm representatives showed up for our first meeting, I saw that it was Anne Dubois, a high school friend of Mia's. At first, I was stunned to see her. All of Mia's negative experiences flashed through my mind. I immediately felt awkward. I felt myself blushing as we came face to face. "Max, oh my God," she said. "Is that really you?" she asked with genuine warmth. Ignoring my outstretched hand, she enclosed me in a very nice hug. I immediately began to relax. I remembered the kindness Anna had shown when we were teenagers. "How are you doing?" she asked. "You look great, so is that any of your business?" She peppered me with questions. We spent a few minutes figuring things out. She had a degree in architecture and was in graduate school for landscape architecture. She had an apartment in the city and worked as a designer at GL2 architecture firm. I briefly told her about my work, but quickly changed the subject to our office and some of my ideas for what I wanted to do for our front entrance. Anna seemed a little surprised that I had switched to business so quickly. She asked a few questions, took some notes, and said she'd have some preliminary sketches by Friday. "It was so good to see you, Max," she told me with a wide smile on her face. "I'll call you at the end of the week." She continued. Another brief hug, and she was gone. Anna looked even better than she did in high school. Same beautiful face and same beautiful body, I thought. Careful, I said to myself. The memories of my experience with Mia were no longer fresh, but still strong. The first architect came in with a huge estimate, so I crossed him off the list. The third postponed the appointment. I hoped Anna had a good plan that would fit into our budget. Thursday afternoon, she called. "I have a couple ideas for your entry," Anna told me. "Great," I said. "I look forward to seeing them." "Would you like to meet tomorrow for lunch?" she asked. "We can meet at the Bluebird any time that's convenient for you," she offered. I hesitated. I know it's a business meeting, but it felt like a date to me. It wasn't that I didn't go on dates at all. Rather, her connection to Mia seemed too tight. I think she sensed my wariness and quickly stepped in. Or I could come by your office if you'd like, she said. No, I said, I can have lunch tomorrow, say 12:30, I asked. She agreed to that time, and we set off for lunch. That evening, I was experiencing a mixture of emotions. The anger at Mia had not subsided to this day. Somehow in my brain, Anna had become associated with that anger. Another thought was the hope that her design would be acceptable and within our budget. And the last thought. Anna was beautiful, and I enjoyed her company. Alarm bells rang. When we met at the Bluebird Bistro, she looked even better. She seemed to have taken extra time to look good. I'm sure her appearance helped secure business for GL2. Again, a warm hug as a sign of welcome. We skipped the small talk and moved on to her projects. The first idea was a good one. Pretty simple. The second was a little Asian-inspired. I liked that one. Now for the cost. The first option was a little under budget, but the Asian design was $10,000 over our maximum budget. I told her I would have to think about it. Just then, the food arrived and we started talking, but not really about business. She asked where I lived, and I told her the story about Aunt Helen and my inheritance. She seemed genuinely interested in my living situation. She knew about the plot of land. Later, she asked about my weekend plans. On weekends, I do either the house or the yard, depending on the weather, I told her. When the weather is nice, like this weekend, I spend most of Saturday and Sunday outside. I love gardens and plants, she told me. It must be nice to have so much land. I've described the work on my property many times, I told her, but I've never called it fun. And with a laugh, I added, Well, I'd love to see it, she said. Maybe one day I'll surprise you and stop by, she said. The next day, Saturday, just like I told Anna, I worked in the yard all day. There was so much work to do. Aunt Helen had laid out a formal English garden on most of the property, sculptural hedges, rose gardens, and planned plantings. I wasn't sure what I wanted, but Aunt Helen's style seemed too old-fashioned. It must have been the middle of the day when I saw dust on the driveway signaling the arrival of guests. Most likely, it would be my mom or dad, but I knew they were out of town. To my surprise, it was Anna. I immediately looked around, unshaven, dirty, sweaty, and shirtless. I greeted her and immediately reached for my shirt. You didn't need to put it on me, she said. I was just admiring the scenery, she added with a laugh. I looked at her, trying to figure out what she meant. The first thought that ran through my head was, wow, she really works hard to get that landscaping contract. I pushed that thought aside and politely gave her a big tour of the property. She seemed genuinely interested. I pointed out things I needed to do and she made a few suggestions that seemed like good ideas. So, what have you been working on? She asked. I told her, and she didn't hesitate to start helping me with my current work. I appreciated her help, but couldn't help but wonder about her motivation. She seemed to be doing everything she could to get the contract. We worked like that, side by side, for several hours. It was a very comfortable environment. I had to admit that I enjoyed her company. Toward the end of the day, she said it was time for me to leave, but she lingered, as if waiting for some kind of invitation from me. I thanked her profusely, accompanied her to the bathroom to wash up, and then she left with some reluctance. That evening, all my thoughts were occupied with Anna. She was beautiful and so sweet, but she had once been friends with Mia. That was a huge minus sign for me. That week, we discussed the landscaping proposal. I told her we liked the Asian-themed design better, but it was over budget. I hinted that we had other suggestions, but there were none. By the end of the week, she came back with slight changes to the original design and a new cost that was only $2,000 over budget. We came to an agreement. She said they could start work in 3 weeks. We need to celebrate, she said. Ha ha ha, I grinned unfunny. Have a good weekend, I told her. She looked a little discouraged that I didn't support the idea of celebrating. It was another warm weekend, and I was working on my allotment. Saturday afternoon, Anna showed up again, this time with a picnic basket. Say, you can put this in the house, she asked as she handed me the basket. Now what are we going to work on? I told her, and she set to work. At the end of the day, she asked me to bring a picnic basket and a corkscrew. She spread a tablecloth on the ground. She made a mini feast and brought a bottle of Oregon Pinot Noir. We had a pleasant evening, and I really enjoyed talking to her. We seemed to have a lot in common. I also began to think that since we had already signed with GL2, her firm, there was no point in continuing to be nice if that was the only goal. Over the next few weeks, we continued to see each other. She would either come by the office to get information about our design project, or she would stop by on the weekends and help me around the house. We continued to see each other and our friendship grew. However, nothing romantic yet. She wasn't making any moves, and I, although a big part of me wanted to, still felt a nagging reminder of Mia's betrayal, warning me that I could get hurt. It was Friday evening. I left the office around 6 o'clock, went home and took an evening 5-mile jog. As I was contemplating dinner, my cell phone rang. It was Anna. "Hi, Anna," I greeted. Loud conversations and music could be heard in the background. Getting no answer, I asked, "Hello? Do you have a girlfriend?" Anna replied in a slightly audible voice. "Hmm?" I replied. At that moment, I heard a rustle, then another voice in the background, and then the phone. "Hi, Max. My name is Lindsay. I'm Anna's friend," she said. "She had a little too much to drink and said she was going to drive to your place, but she shouldn't drive. Can you come to Palantino's and pick her up?" She asked. I replied that I could. I quickly cleaned up and headed downtown. Palantino's is a very nice restaurant and bar. A little too nice to be a pickup bar, more of a date establishment. I found them and met Lindsay. She was quite attractive, but then there was Anna. In my eyes, she was a goddess, no comparison. Anna was a little drunk and apologized for calling. I ordered a beer and Lindsay quickly left. It was just Anna and me. After being at Palantino's for only a few minutes, she asked me, "Can we go to your house?" I agreed, and we drove. We pulled up to the house and I mentally assessed his condition. I knew it still looked like it was inhabited by an elderly single woman. I hadn't had time to do anything inside yet, all my energies were directed outward. Anna didn't seem to care. It was unclear to me where this conversation would lead. Anna, slightly tipsy, asked if I liked her, and I replied that of course I did. She asked if I had a girlfriend, and I replied that I didn't. "I don't mean to sound smug," she said, "but usually guys like me, but I don't feel that way." I assured her that she was very attractive. She then asked why I still hadn't asked her out. I took a deep breath and talked about my insecurities about my high school relationship with Mia. We talked about it for a bit, and then she brought up Tanner. "I know he's your friend, and he can be fun to be with," she said, "but he can also be a jerk. I've learned to stay away from those self-centered types. I'm much better with a different type of man." Having said that, she looked me straight in the eye. There was silence for a moment, and my thoughts swirled around in my head. This was all good, I hoped. At that moment, she excused herself to go to the bathroom. I sat pensive, wondering what to do next. I shouldn't have bothered. The next step became quite obvious when she returned. We made love. So we began a new chapter in our relationship. I felt my life was going in the right direction on several fronts. Business was going well. I was trying to transform our business without interrupting or changing all the positive things that had brought success to my father. My home was being transformed. Anna loved working there. She especially loved gardening, landscaping, and designing outdoor spaces. More than once, she begged me never to sell this valuable and unique piece of land she was transforming. And of course, my relationship with Anna was a beautiful one. The small, uncertain voices of doubt turned into a rare whisper. Anna continued to assure me of her love. There was one thing I had been putting off but knew I had to do. I needed to call Tanner. I had to tell him about my relationship with Anna. I knew it had been almost 9 years since they'd been together, but there was some murky male code we had to follow to some extent. I was dating his ex-girlfriend. As far as I knew, there was no statute of limitations. I had to call him. Tanner lived in Texas. He worked for a big real estate developer on the outskirts of Houston. In my infrequent conversations with him, it looked like things were going well. He claimed he liked it in Texas, but at some point he wouldn't mind moving back to the Pacific Northwest. I made the call. After a few minutes, I started talking about the reason for my call. "Tanner," I began. "I'd like to talk to you about something," I said. There was a pause, and he fell silent. "Well, I wanted to let you know that I'm in a relationship with Anna," I told him. "Dubois?" he exclaimed after a pause. I could hear the disbelief in his tone. Yes, with Anna from St. Cecilia's School, I said. Silence hung on the line at first, and then I heard the rudiments of a giggle coming from Tanner. Well, congratulations, he said. She's a wonderful girl. I'm proud of you. I know you've been wary of women for a while. He continued. We talked for a few more minutes, and his casual acceptance of my and Anna's relationship dispelled all my fears. When we finished talking, he said, I'm going to have to get up soon and visit you all. Visit you? It looked like Tanner was starting to like Texas. Months went by, and our relationship seemed to continue to grow. Anna took over the garden and landscaping at my house. We worked side by side to change the whole atmosphere of the place. We were a team working together. I had been thinking about making an offer, and discussing it with Tanner seemed to remove one obstacle. Now that everything was in place, I had no doubts. My trust issues had all but disappeared. Anna's assurances that she had feelings for me had extinguished any vestiges of insecurity in me. I started looking for the ring. One of the byproducts of a business like insurance is that you meet a lot of people. You also have to promote yourself to those people. It was always nice when I really liked the person I was doing business with. One of my new friend's clients was a slightly older man named Greg Boston. I first met Greg when I was a client of his. He was building a work shed for me on my property. One evening when he finished the job, we had a beer and got to talking. I told him about my business, and he ended up becoming my client. More importantly, he became a good friend of mine. Greg went from doing small remodeling jobs like he did for me to building houses. In our neighborhood, the key to being a successful builder was buildable land. Greg was always good-naturedly asking me if I ever wanted to sell the land. I politely declined. Eventually, I made an offer, and a happy, overjoyed Anna accepted. Now we had to get down to the business of organizing the wedding. Anna and her mom did most of that work. I became so good friends with Greg that I asked him to be my best man. Tanner, I asked to be my best man. One day during the wedding preparations, Anna and I were walking around the barn that Greg had built. She turned to me with a serious look on her face. Max, I need to talk to you about something, she said to me. Oh, now what? I gave her a silent nod. It's about the guest list, and Mia, she said. A wave of relief came over me, and here I thought it was something serious. I have to invite Mia and her husband, she said. I've known Mia most of my life. She won't be a bridesmaid or anything, just a guest. She looked at me intently. I thought for a moment. I knew that Anna was still friends with Mia, if not to say friends. I also knew that Mia had married that asshole Michael Ameche. And I also knew that their friendship had weakened, mainly because Anna knew how much I disliked Mia. I discovered another thing. When Anna didn't want to answer a question, she would answer a question with a question. I first suspected this when she was out with friends one evening. When she got home, I asked who she was with. Why do you need to know that? What? She replied. I suspected that Mia was out with a group of friends. I let it pass my ears because I knew she was trying to protect me. But that trait of hers was worth noting. I paused and said, Of course, she's an old friend of yours. I realize she needs to be present. I took the upper hand. Thank you, she said. The wedding was wonderful. We played it on our grounds. The gardens and grounds looked fantastic. Anna did a great job with the landscaping and was proud of the work she had done. The wedding gave her the opportunity to show how she had transformed everything. There were a few people among the guests that were noteworthy. First, Tanner, my good high school friend and Anna's ex-boyfriend. Tanner's outgoing personality quickly dispelled any awkwardness about Anna and Tanner's longtime friendship. Speaking of character, even though he was wearing a tuxedo, the Texas influence was obvious. Along with the tuxedo, he was wearing a Stetson hat and black cowboy boots. I lost count of how many times he said, y'all, but he managed it. I'd forgotten how much fun Tanner could be. He'd also brought a date, a stunning blonde with a European accent. Her name was Greta St. Kitts. She was gorgeous. And although I thought my Anna was beautiful, and I hate to say it, she looked a little plain next to Greta. And then I realized I should greet Mia and Michael. I had avoided any contact or talking about them since middle school. Congratulations, buddy, Ameche said to me and held out his hand. Thanks, Michael, I said, and shook the outstretched hand. Mia headed towards me for a hug. I quickly extended my hand in greeting. She hesitated for a moment and then shook my hand. "You look beautiful, Mia," I said in greeting. She looked at me, as if confused and not believing my sincerity. She opened her mouth to say something, looked around, and fell silent. "What kind of business are you in?" Ameche asked me. I briefly told him about my insurance agency and then felt compelled to answer the question. That was a mistake. Amici spent almost 15 minutes talking about his job and how good he was at it. He worked in property management for a company I had heard of, Winegrass Properties. I remembered his friendship with Jordan Winegrass from my high school days. The company had a dubious reputation as a slumlord who used, at best, unethical methods to acquire real estate. Michael never said anything about it. The owner of the company was Jordan's father, Sidney. "Stop by sometime," Amechi told me. "Maybe you can save us some insurance money." And he held out a business card to me. I nodded in affirmation, knowing full well that I wanted nothing to do with either Ameche or Vingris. Another guest I should mention was our receptionist in the insurance office, Yasmin Reynosa. She was wonderful, hardworking, with a slight accent and just over 5 feet tall. She worked for us for almost 2 years and became an invaluable member of the company. I never met her husband, saw him a couple times when he picked her up after work and waved to him, but that was it. Yasmin introduced me to her husband, Angel. If I had to guess by looking at him, I'd say Angel Reynosa might be in a gang. Tattoos covered his arms and ran down his neck. He also had a rugged look, but the conversation was very polite. "Where are you going on your honeymoon?" Angel asked. Angel asked. Angel asked. I told him we were going to Hawaii. He seemed genuinely interested and started asking me about the trip. I told him a little about where we were going and what we would be doing. As we talked, he hugged a miniature Yasmin. "Someday, baby," he said to Yasmin, "I'm going to take you there." He said it with such sincerity that it touched me. The rest of the wedding went great. We had a good time and the guests seemed to enjoy themselves as well. We honeymooned, as I told Reynos, in Hawaii, and had a wonderful time. It was over and we went back to our normal lives, only now I was married. Our married life was wonderful. We were both working full-time. We worked out a little plan for the house and grounds. Anna seemed to be more motivated than I was to take on the work that needed to be done while we transformed Aunt Helen's old house. After the wedding, the photographer we hired asked to come over and take some pictures of the grounds. He was impressed. He explained that they were doing an article for the Sunday paper and were looking for unique scenery. Anna was thrilled, plus it was free advertising for her and her GL2 landscape architecture firm. Anna spent every spare hour before the photo shoot working on the gardens. When the photo shoot ran in the Sunday paper, Anna appeared in 2 images. Her photogenic beauty, I think, was one of the reasons for her appearance. Also, she was quoted several times in the newspaper article. She seemed to be a born media specialist. Another event happened in our lives about a year after we were married. Tanner moved back in with us, and he told me how successful he had been in Texas working for a large firm. He decided he could bring some of his experience to the Pacific Northwest and start his own company. He named it Texas Pacific. Tanner rented an expensive office downtown. He hired an attractive secretary. He furnished the office to perfection. One day he said to me, "To be successful, you have to look successful." I agreed to some extent, but Tanner was on the verge of being apathetic. Tanner became a part of Anna and me. Tanner was lonely, the glamorous Greta St. Kitts and Tanner were no longer together. I had my moments of jealousy, but for the most part, I was quite relaxed about Tanner, Anna, and I being together. I also became Tanner's insurance agent. I insured his personal property as well as his business. Tanner was categorized as a high-maintenance customer. I was constantly calling him because I needed to pay an insurance premium. Several times I had to drive to his office and ask him to give me a check so I could make sure he was uninsured. I had to keep track of everything all the time. It wasn't my job, but I did it for Tanner. You miss a payment, the insurance goes away. One evening, Anna, Tanner, and I were at our house, sipping wine and talking about our professional and life goals. I said, "I love helping people make good financial choices in their lives. I don't think I'll ever get rich, but I love what I do, and I love seeing the people I've helped become successful. I'm happy with a quiet life." After standing for a while, Anna said, "Someday, I want to start my own landscaping company." I want to be known in the community. I want my work to be shown and discussed. I guess I want to be famous in some way. She laughed a little as she said this, but I knew she meant it. After a few minutes, Tanner spoke up. I'm a little different from both of you, he said, and he spoke in a very uncharacteristically sincere voice. I want to make so much money that I don't have to do anything I don't feel like doing. I want to have a big score. I want to know that I can leave the business anytime I want to and that it won't affect my lifestyle. That's what I want. I looked at Tanner in silence, and even though we were good friends, I realized how different we were. Months went by, and months added up to years. I often thought about that impromptu conversation about goals that took place between me, Tanner, and Anna that June evening. I felt that while my goals may not have been all that lofty, I was achieving them. Business at the insurance agency was going well. My father worked 20 to 30 hours a week. He would come in the morning around 9 o'clock with the newspaper. I continued to get new clients and was constantly coming up with ideas to expand the business. Anna was also working toward her goals. Less than a year ago, she left GL2 and became self-sufficient. With the help of my friend Greg Boston, the shed was turned into a full office. The shed stands among the many garden structures she created on my property. It has become a great place for Anna and her business to showcase her landscaping abilities. She landed several contracts for landscaping our backyard while a client wandered the grounds. That left Tanner. As far as I could tell, things were going well for Tanner. He was always active and constantly working on some project or development. I knew from my business dealings with him that at times his cash flow became quite shaky. As I told you before, I constantly had to remind him to pay his bonus. I wouldn't call him disorganized, rather, he was just heavily leveraged. But I knew his goal. He wanted to make a big score. One evening in mid-May, he called me and suggested we meet for drinks. He wanted to talk to me about something. Let's meet at the Evergreen around 6 p.m., he told me. Evergreen was a nice bar and restaurant geared towards the young party crowd. Not my choice, but it was okay. Max, how are you? He gave me a hug as a greeting, and we sat down. I knew Tanner well enough to know he was in his aggressive salesman mode. I knew he wanted something, I just didn't know what exactly yet. I may have the deal of a lifetime, he began, rubbing his palms together. It's a little complicated, but it's guaranteed to pay off. I wanted to give you a chance to get in on the deal, Max, he told me. I didn't doubt that Tanner considered me a good friend, but I'd spent enough time with him to realize that being part of this deal wasn't proof of our friendship. He wanted something from me. Tanner told me that he had an option on a valuable piece of real estate on the island of Kauai in Hawaii. The widow of one of the principals of the firm he worked for in Texas owned the property and was thinking of selling it. Tanner had befriended her and always told her that if she wanted to sell the property, she should ask him first. He seemed to have succeeded in charming the elderly widow. Now she was offering the land to Tanner. She wants $1 million for the lot, he excitedly informed me. It should be worth 2 or 3 times that. It's on a beautiful sandy beach. When we build something, we'll get at least $5 million for a house on the beach, he explained. He pulled out a folder and showed me pictures of this bare plot of land, overgrown with shrubs and palm trees. The blue-green sea glistened in the background. I realized how special this property was. I can take out some loans and raise $500,000 with the money I have, Tanner told me. If you put in $500,000, we can buy the property 50/50ths. I'll create high-end real estate marketing materials. We'll sell the beach properties, and in a minimum of 1 year, your money will double. Maximum in 18 months. He continued. His eyes followed my reaction. His enthusiasm was contagious in a way. I sat for a moment and thought about it. He continued to add cogent comments as I mulled over his suggestion. Tanner, I began. Wow, you caught me off guard. It really is a beautiful estate, but $500,000 is a lot of money. I don't have the ability to get that amount right away. It would take a large secured loan, I told him. All the while, he was nodding his head, trying to convey his excitement to me. He talked for a few more minutes about the deal, the property, and the profits. Finally, I told him that I needed to talk to Anna and think it over. For the rest of the evening, Tanner was on edge. He was enthusiastic about everything. He was in serious sales mode. Max, he exclaimed, you're my best friend. We've known each other for a long time. I truly believe this will be good for us, he told me. I said I'd contact him tomorrow, but it was funny that the more he convinced me, the more wary I was of entering into any partnership with Tanner. Later that evening, I told Anna about Tanner's offer. She was curious about it. If nothing else, she was more interested in the opportunity than I was. I, on the other hand, had mixed feelings, and the more I thought about it, the less enthusiastic I became. I would get some sleep. By mid-morning, I decided to turn down the offer to invest in real estate for many reasons. The main reasons were two. I was too conservative in my investment philosophy. And the second reason was that I was worried that it might damage my friendship with Tanner in the long run if problems arose. I wrote Tanner and asked if he would agree to meet for lunch. He said yes. I knew he would be disappointed when I told him no, but I wasn't prepared for him to be disappointed. He got angry. Exactly, he told me. How can you turn down a $500,000 profit? The friendliness had long since vanished. Now he doubted my intelligence and common sense. Finally, he played his last card. He questioned my friendship. When I tried to explain my concerns about how this deal might affect our friendship, he dismissed my arguments. The more animated he became over my refusal to join his deal, the more certain I was that I had made the right decision. Tanner, I said to him at last, if it's as solid a deal as you describe, surely you'll have many more willing to cooperate with you. He just stared at me. I could see that my words made him angry, but I didn't know why. Even Anna thinks it's a good deal, he told me. Anna? I asked. Have you talked to Anna about this? I asked. Since when does he talk to Anna about such things? An emotion flashed through my brain that I thought I was long done with. Jealousy. He tried to explain that he wanted her landscaping ideas for the proposed site. Ha, I thought. I'll have to listen to Anna. When we left the house, he was no longer as enthusiastic as he had been the night before. Now there was a small gap separating our friendship. It would be interesting to see how this would develop. Weeks passed. Anna told me that she had been talking to Tanner about the property and he had asked her about the tropical landscape. She was eager to share her ideas for the project with him. She said she hadn't worked with tropical design before and was interested. She told me that she thought investing in the land was a good deal, but also understood why I declined. Gradually, over the course of a few weeks, my friendship with Tanner recovered somewhat. We were doing business together, so we needed to talk. I never asked him about the project, but it seemed to me that he was pushing the plan in some way. One day I stopped by his office to pick up another, almost belated bonus check. I saw a glossy brochure with a picture of a magnificent tropical house. I immediately realized it was about a beautiful beachfront property on Kauai. While I was looking at it, Tanner came out of his office. He told me that he had an interested party in the house. He told me that he had personally raised the money, arranged the loan, and bought the land on Kauai. He said he is almost finished building a large rustic cedar house on a large lot in wine country. Once he finishes work on it, he will temporarily move to Kauai to start building the estate in about a month. I asked about the deal to sell the estate on Kauai. It will sell for $5.5 million, he told me. Wow, $5.5 million, I exclaimed. And who's the buyer? I asked. A local guy, actually, said Tanner. You know Sidney Winegrass? Yeah, I knew who Sidney Winegrass was. He had that asshole Michael Amici working for him. He didn't have a very good reputation, but I assumed he was rich. Tanner, I said, be careful when dealing with Winegrass. I've heard some not-so-good things about him and his business. Max, Tanner said, don't worry, I know Sid. We've done business together. He's a great guy. Tanner brushed off my concerns. A few days later, Anna came in and said she had a new client. Tanner. She explained that she would create a design for a beachfront home he was building on Kauai. I'm excited about it, she said. I've always wanted to do a tropical project, she said. What will be required of you? I asked. Most of the work will be done in my office, but I was hoping that in October, when I need to be there, you and I could take a second honeymoon, and it would be a tax write-off, she told me. It actually sounded wonderful, especially in March in the Pacific Northwest, when rain, wind, and cold seem like a familiar part of life. A warm tropical vacation sounds wonderful, and I would love to see this house. Plus, I felt it would be good for our relationship. Revitalize it. A week later, Anna burst in on me with another batch of potentially good news. One of the local TV stations, KPL, wanted to add a weekly garden program, and they wanted to talk to Anna about hosting it. Life seemed to be moving in a positive direction for both Anna and me. All was well, although I was beginning to feel a bit like Anna, and my connection was not as strong. I attributed it to the fact that we were both busy. One evening, Tanner, Anna, and I went for a walk. Tanner was scheduled to leave for Kauai in the next few days. We discussed our second honeymoon work vacation in October when we would visit Tanner's place of employment. Tanner talked a bit about the finances involved in buying a lot and building a beach house on Kauai. It was complicated, and I couldn't figure out how legitimate it all was. It seemed like he was commingling funds. The money to complete the cabin in wine country could have gone to pay for part of the estate on Kauai. It was complicated, and to say the least, unethical. The way I set it up, he told us, when we close on the sale of the Kauai estate, I should get almost $4 million after taxes. He smiled and leaned back in his chair. I hoped he could make it work, but I had my doubts. After listening to him, I had no doubts about my decision not to enter into a real estate partnership with him. As we parted ways with Tanner and drove home, I voiced some of my concerns about Tanner's risky deal. "Can't you just be happy for him?" Anna said. "Just because he's taking a bigger risk than you, don't mean he's doing the wrong thing," she told me. I didn't say anything back. I was surprised by her defense of Tanner. A few months later, Anna was interviewed by a local TV station, KPL, which was looking for a gardener to host a weekly program on Fridays. The idea was to get local garden centers to sponsor the program and encourage homeowners to plan garden projects for the upcoming weekend. She was nervous and anxious. Anna looked great and was photogenic, and that was going to play in her favor. She also had beautiful gardens on my property that she had created to serve as a backdrop for her weekly gardening tips, and she also had a shed office that could be converted into a makeshift studio. In early September, she was contacted by KPAL and offered a contract to host a weekly program in the garden with Anna, beginning in late November through the holidays and then again in late winter. Anna was thrilled. Not only was she getting a paycheck from KPAL, but she was also getting free advertising for her landscape company, Distinctive Gardens. All of this was great news. I felt she had been putting a lot of energy into her career lately, and it was well worth it. However, I couldn't escape the thought that less of her energy was now directed toward us. We began discussing our trip to Kauai. Anna had been corresponding with Tanner about the oceanfront project on Kauai. It seemed to be progressing, but perhaps not as smoothly as Tanner had envisioned. I didn't know how often she talked to Tanner, but I had stopped by her office a few times when she was talking to him, and what I heard didn't sound like business talk, more like small talk. We were supposed to leave on Friday and stay the following weekend for 8 days at the Sheraton Hotel on Kauai. I was looking forward to the break. I think we needed a good vacation to get our relationship back on track. My dad and Yasmin would take care of everything while I was gone. I knew that with Yasmin, everything would be in good hands. 2 days before we were supposed to leave, an accident happened. My father had a heart attack, he was at home, and he started having chest pains. My mom called me in on 911. The ambulance took my dad to St. Luke's Hospital. Anna and I met Mom at the hospital. Dad was conscious, but he was in pain. We stayed with him for a few minutes before we were escorted out by his nurse. Later, we met with the cardiologist, and he said my dad would be in the hospital for a few days and then on bed rest at home. Anna and I knew what that meant. A trip to Kauai was out of the question. Not only did I have to support my parents, but I had to work in the office for a week. Anna said she would stay home too, but we both knew she needed to be on site and oversee the landscaping. I was busy with my dad. We both decided she should go and then try to get home as soon as possible. We would celebrate our second honeymoon at another time. My father was still in the hospital when I took Anna to the airport. I was consumed with worrying about my father's health and didn't think about Anna's trip. During the trip, I tried to focus on her, telling her how much I would miss her and asking her to take time to relax and enjoy Hawaii. We said goodbye to her with hugs and kisses. She quickly disappeared into the long security screening line at the airport. I promised to call her every day. I went back to my father's bedside. On Saturday, my father was discharged with clear instructions to follow bed rest. The doctors were considering surgical options, including bypass surgery. My mom and I were to be at his bedside for the next week to make sure he was recovering properly. My dad always went to bed early and got up early. I told my mom that I would be there by 5 o'clock Sunday morning to be by his side and give my mom a chance to get some sleep. She let me go around 9 in the morning. As I was driving home, I was surprised to get a call from Tanner. He asked about my dad and then asked me to stop by a construction site in wine country where he was just finishing building a big cedar house. He needed something the inspector had left behind. I told him I would be with my dad today but could pick him up sometime next week. He replied that any time during the week. I also told him that his insurance premium was overdue. Yeah, I'll get it, he told me. Typical. I'll have to stop by his office and pick up a check. When I was on the phone, I wished I was in Hawaii with Anna. I think the soft Hawaiian music I heard in the background while talking to Tanner was to blame. It made me think of our honeymoon trip. I associated Hawaiian music with the wonderful time we had spent there. I decided to call Anna. It took a few minutes, but she sleepily answered. Good morning, she greeted me. And then it came to me that it was still early there. There is a 3-hour time difference between Hawaii and the West Coast. It was only 6 in the morning on Kauai. I forgot how early it is, sorry, I told her. That's okay. How's your dad? She asked. We continued talking about my dad and her trip. I longed to be with her. I envisioned the open doors to the balcony, the warm breeze, the sound of the ocean, the tropical smell in the air, and the constant, beautiful Hawaiian music. We were just talking, and I was about to discuss a couple more things with her when my mom called, and I had to disconnect. I'll call you later, I told her and switched to talking to Mom. I had lunch with Dad while Mom ran errands. When she came back, she asked if I could do some chores around the house while she babysat Dad. I agreed and thought of Anna on Kauai, wishing I could be there again. I thought back to our brief conversation and the sensual images of Hawaii. Beaches, palm trees, sunsets, music. Music? I started thinking about music. I remembered the music playing in the background when I was talking to Anna. And I also remembered the same music when I was talking to Tanner. I was seized with a flash of suspicious jealousy. I analyzed the facts. Tanner called me, and I heard Hawaiian music. A few minutes later, I called Anna. It was still early Sunday morning in Hawaii. It sounded like Anna was in bed and had just woken up. I heard the same Hawaiian music. Were they together? And if so, what were they doing together at 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning? Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe Tanner was just staying at the same hotel as Anna, and the music was coming from the speakers. For a moment, it seemed possible, and I relaxed. But come to think of it, Tanner wouldn't have stayed at the $300 plus a night Sheraton for months on end while he worked on his beach house. He needed to find other, more economical accommodations. Tanner spent the night with Anna? I decided to call Anna. I told her my father was feeling better and we made small talk. Nothing concrete. Then I decided to ask a few questions. I asked her about the project and some general questions. Did you hang out with Tanner after work? I asked innocently. She hesitated. Why do you ask? She replied. Uh-oh. I knew that when she didn't want to answer a question, she'd ask again. I didn't say anything like that to her, I said nonchalantly. Just asking, said I. I mean, I saw him at the construction site, she told me. That's all, she said. I kept the conversation light, but alarm bells were ringing in my soul. I didn't have definitive proof, but I had some clues that reinforced my suspicions. Later, I called Tanner, ostensibly to remind him about the overdue bonus. Yeah, I know, he said. I'll contact Bernadette in the morning. I kept the conversation light, nothing specific, just the usual chatter. I then thanked him for taking care of Anna while she was there alone. No problem, he replied. Can't have my buddy's beautiful wife left unattended at night, he added. We talked some more and then I walked out. Something wasn't right. Anna had told me that she only met Tanner at the construction site, but in the evenings Tanner took her to places she'd been. The stories didn't add up, but I didn't have any concrete evidence that anything was going on, just a lot of evidence. I started to formulate a plan. I made a phone call and set up a meeting for tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock sharp. Monday morning, I met with Yasmin and Angel Reynosa at the office. I asked them for complete confidentiality. They agreed. I explained to them my concerns about Anna and Tanner. They didn't ask questions, just listened. I asked if they could go to Kauai and do an informal investigation. I gave them a folder with pictures of Tanner and Anna for identification. When, Mr. Max? Angel asked. When do you want us to do it? He asked. Tomorrow, I told them. I want you there until next Sunday. You'll be staying in the same hotel as Anna. Just keep an eye on her. If nothing happens, just enjoy the week. I explained. Angel and Yasmin immediately agreed. I told Yasmin that I would organize everything myself and gave them $1,000 for expenses besides lodging and airfare. I said I'd drive them to the airport in the morning, but not a word to anyone about why they were going. They agreed. As they were leaving the office, Angel stopped me. Mr. Max, he said, thank you if you ever need a favor. Ask Angel, he told me. He looked me in the eye, shook my hand, and left. Maybe I'm paranoid, but hearing Reynosa say that Anna and Tanner were innocent of everything my overly jealous imagination had conjured up cost me a few $1,000s. I continued to call Anna every day, but not once did I get the slightest hint from her that anything untoward had happened. I was starting to feel a little silly about my paranoia and sending Reynosa to spy. Thursday afternoon, I decided to head out to Tanner's nearly completed project in wine country. He asked me to pick up one document from the county. As soon as I pulled up to the house, I got a call from Yasmin. I told them not to call unless there was something to report. I expected her to tell me everything was fine, but it wasn't. Max, she began, Angel took some pictures you need to see, she told me. I asked her to tell me, but all she kept repeating was, you'll see the pictures. I heard my phone beeping from the messages I had received. I said I would call her back. There were 4 pictures. The pictures depicted my wife's infidelity. I was sitting on a 5-gallon bucket in the garage of the house. I was devastated. My wife and my best friend. I couldn't believe it. After everything I'd been through with Mia over the years now, it was all happening again. But worse, much worse. I don't know exactly how long I sat there, but over an hour, contemplating the fact that the life I knew was ending. I didn't know what to do. Could I forgive her? Could I forgive him? The answers were no and hell no. And then 2 things started to happen to me. First, anger began to creep into my brain. White-hot anger. 2, I started getting dizzy from the oil paint that had been applied to the cedar shingles. In the corner of the garage, I saw a pile of oily rags. In one of my insurance classes, I remembered the danger of oiled rags spontaneously combusting. I headed toward them, but stopped suddenly. I carefully put on a pair of lightweight gloves. I gathered up all the rags and put them in a metal bucket, stacking them. Into the bucket, I poured some more oil-based stain. Next to the bucket, I put a bundle of number 1 cedar shingles. Then I turned on the heater next to the bucket of oiled rags. Then I stepped back. I took the document Tanner needed and left. Here in wine country, there were no neighbors nearby. Besides, I had my own purpose for being here. If arson really happened, how could anyone blame me? I remembered that we had discussed spontaneous combustion. It occurs when oily rags or cloth are slowly heated to ignition temperature by oxidation. When a substance oxidizes, it begins to release heat. If this heat has no outlet, such as in a pile, the temperature will rise to a level high enough to ignite the oil and set the rag or cloth on fire. The fire from this can quickly spread to other combustible materials and cause a lot of damage. I sent Tanner a message that I had the document. I later received a thank you in response. I also started thinking about Tanner's insurance. It was about to expire. I had texted him about it several times earlier in the week. There was no way I could stop by his house to pick up the insurance. Technically, he didn't have fire insurance now. I thought about Anna. I couldn't forgive her. There was no way she could realize how much she'd hurt me. I just wanted her to feel the same pain. After a few minutes, I had an idea. I called Greg Boston, a friend of mine who was a builder. We agreed to meet tonight. I told him it was very important and urgent. We met at a small restaurant. He looked at me and realized something was wrong. He asked, and I brushed him off. Greg, you've asked me about my land several times already. I told him, and he nodded. I want to sell it, but I have a few conditions. I told him. The most important one is that I want the house and garden cleared and dealt with in the next 3 days. He almost choked when he heard the timetable. 3 days, he whispered. That's impossible, he told me. I told him that if it wasn't, I'd find someone who could do it. Wait, Max, let me think about it, he said. After a while, he said he thought he could do it, but it would be complicated. We discussed the price and one other important condition. We had a gentleman's agreement. We shook hands and he said he would start work tomorrow. Max, as a friend, I have to ask you what's going on, he said. Greg, I said. We'll discuss it someday, but today is not that day. I told him. He nodded and we both left. That night, my phone rang on the nightstand. Tanner. I didn't pick up the phone. When I woke up, I had an urgent voicemail from Tanner asking me to call him. I took my time. I flipped through the morning news. Fire in Yamhill County, 4 alarms, wine country. No one was hurt, the house was empty, but it was completely destroyed. On the way out, I called Tanner, and he answered in desperation. Max, the house we were finishing up burned down, he said. I need the money. When can we get compensation? He asked. Wait, said I. What house? I was becoming quite an actor. He started talking about the house, his cash flow that had merged with the house he was building for Winegrass on Kauai. He was in a panic, jumping from one topic to another. I wasn't sure I could help him, even if I wanted to, and I didn't want to. Tanner, I said calmly, let me go to the office and look at things. We can talk later. Did you tell Bernadette to send a check for the bonus? I asked. What? He hissed. Didn't you get it? I think I asked her for it. Does it matter? He continued. I told him I'd look into it and disconnected. He was still talking when I hung up. I wasn't going to continue the conversation. Our friendship was over. Now it was up to me to deal with Anna. Over the next few days, I called Anna and tried my best to act normal. I think she sensed something was wrong, but she didn't say anything. I received some more pictures from Angel Reynosa. They only confirmed the previous pictures. Tanner kept calling. There was more and more desperation in each voicemail. Anna was due home on Monday, the day after tomorrow. I hadn't said anything to my parents yet. Dad didn't need the extra stress, and I needed Mom to focus on Dad. Greg Boston had several heavy equipment vehicles, graders, backhoes, tractors, preparing the land for development. I delivered several capsules and placed all of Anna's personal and business belongings in one. My stuff went into another. It was so strange driving up to my property. The skyline was completely different. No house, no gardens. Anna's flight arrived around 6 o'clock that Monday evening. I picked her up in my arms and hugged her, but when she kissed me on the lips, I turned around and the kiss landed on my cheek. She threw a questioning look at me. I ignored it and asked how the flight went. On the way home, she realized something was wrong. For a few minutes, we talked about the fire. But after a short conversation, I changed the subject. I wasn't a bad actor, but this was a betrayal I couldn't disguise. I suggested we stop at a small bar on the way home. Max, I've been on the road for 6 hours. I just want to get home, she said. It'll only take a minute, I told her, and pulled into the bar. As we sat down at a table and had a glass each, she looked at me puzzled. What was so important we had to do to stop? She asked. I handed her the folder of photos Angel had sent me. I printed them out. When she opened them, she gasped. She moved her gaze from the pictures to me and back to the pictures again. Max, things aren't what they seem, she began. I hung out with Tanner for a while, but nothing much happened, she said. You have to believe me. I withheld one picture, a picture that clearly showed what they were doing. Did nothing really happen? I asked. She was sobbing. She was saying how sorry she was. She said things had gotten out of hand. Tanner was aggressive and persuasive. He made her feel young again. We can get through this. It'll never happen again. And so on and so on and so on. I had been waiting for this. Anna, I said with calm, controlled anger, I'm not sure you realize how deeply you've hurt me. I hope one day, and it will probably be very soon, you feel the same pain. I told her. Max, I'm really, really sorry. She sobbed. Can't we just go home and try to work things out? She begged. Yeah, I said, it's time to go home. and off we went. For the rest of the trip, I was silent. Anna sobbed and begged for forgiveness. I remained silent. I wondered at what point Anna would realize that things had changed. The wait wasn't long. "Max?" she asked as we got closer. "What? What's going on?" She saw heavy equipment and a house razed to the ground. She continued to stare into the twilight as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. I remained silent, waiting for a reaction. "Max, Max." She swiveled her head between her changed appearance and looking at me. "Where is everything? My house, my office, my gardens?" Her voice rose. "I've decided to develop this estate. I have a good offer for the land," I told her calmly. "They are going to build 28 houses. I got a very good price. I think it will work out," I told her with false enthusiasm. "You sold our house? What about my gardens, my business?" She was furious. And then it hit her. "What about my TV show?" she wailed. I shrugged, raising my palms to the sky in a "oh well" gesture. Anna walked through what had once been her garden. Pieces of once neatly planted shrubs and flowers mingled with the damp earth loosened by heavy machinery. For several minutes, she just stood still, contemplating the changed landscape. "Did you do this to hurt me?" she asked. She asked. She asked. "Is this my punishment?" She yelled at me. I remained silent. "Answer me. Answer me, you asshole!" She screamed. And then she collapsed into a sitting position, tears streaming down her cheeks. She was probably in as much pain as I was. I felt absolutely no sympathy for her. "Did I hurt you?" I asked, with exaggerated disbelief. "We're married, and you're flying off to Hawaii while I take care of my sick father and have fun with my best friend," I told her. When I found out, I realized my life had changed, forever. And that's when I decided to make other changes as well. "Your stuff is in this capsule," I pointed to the closest one. "And here are your car keys." I held out the keys to her. "I need to get to my folks. You might have to stay with your family," I told her and started walking to my car. "Max," she shouted, "well, this is it. You ruined my garden, ruined my career plans, and now you're just walking away? Is that all our marriage is worth?" she asked. I turned to her and stared at her. "Don't you dare question my commitment to our marriage," I told her. "We'll talk about everything, but not today." And I left. The next morning at the office, I told Yasmin everything that had happened. She knew almost everything. I also told her that Tanner would be calling and for her to act as my gatekeeper. Yasmin also confirmed that we never received an insurance paycheck from either Tanner or Texas Pacific. Their insurance was officially canceled last Monday, 3 days before the house fire in wine country. In the middle of the morning, I got a visit from the Yamhill County Fire Marshal. Somehow, probably through Tanner, he was informed that I had been at the house on Thursday, the day of the fire. I told him that yes, I was there. I was picking up papers at Tanner's request. He asked if I noticed anything. Did I smell anything? Did my appearance change? I replied that I had only been in this house once a few months ago, so I had nothing to compare it to. But no, I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. I then asked if they had determined the cause of the fire. "Nothing official yet, but," he said, "it could have been a spontaneous combustion." I furrowed my eyebrows and looked at him with a confused expression. "Spontaneous. What?" I asked. He went on to explain the properties of spontaneous combustion. I nodded, asked a few curious questions, and then he left. That was the last I heard of the fire department. I asked Yasmin to handle Tanner's claims against Guarantor, the company we represent for property and liability insurance. I didn't want to be involved in that case. My anger at Anna was overshadowed only by my anger at Tanner. Tanner kept trying to call me on both my cell phone and my work phone. I ignored the cell phone, and Yasmin was rejecting calls from the office. He seemed to be getting more and more desperate. Yasmin began the process of getting an insurance claim through Guaranty for Tanner. But if I had known how insurance companies work, getting an insurance claim with a late payment would have been difficult. After numerous attempts, I finally took Anna's early morning call. "Max," she said, "we need to talk. I'm so sorry. I love you so much. I need you," she continued. I decided that this meeting was inevitable. I was still in a daze from her betrayal, but I wanted to understand her. What she'd done with Tanner during what was supposed to be our second honeymoon was more than unacceptable. Okay, I agreed. Let's meet at the Coffee Clutch in Old Town at 4 in the afternoon. Having said that, I hung up the phone when she had already agreed to meet. We met, but without a hug or any physical interaction. She kept looking at me, as if assessing my state of mind. Anger, sadness, forgiveness. She wanted to see where I was going with this. I decided to begin. Anna, I began. When we first met, you of all people knew how much my relationship with Mia in high school had hurt me. I know, and I felt so bad that She interrupted me. I held up my hand. Anna, I said, calmly, but with irritation. Let me finish. You'll have your turn, but I think it's important for you to hear where I'm going with this. She nodded her head in acquiescence. After Mia, I continued, I pretty much decided to live my life as a hardened bachelor. I went on dates, but nothing serious, but then you came along. You cheered me up. I thought you understood. I trusted you. I thought I was healed. And now this. You cheated not only on me, but on your ex-boyfriend, my best friend. I'd be very curious to know why. I told her. She spent a few minutes telling me how sorry she was and what a big mistake it was. I looked at her stone-faced, trying to find some forgiveness. Then she told me the story. She was excited about going to Hawaii, even though I wasn't there. She said the sounds, sights, and smells reminded her of how wonderful our honeymoon had been. She was in a good mood. Tanner picked her up at the small airport in Lihue. On the way to Kaloa, he drove her past a construction site. She said she was surprised at how little had been done. Nevertheless, Tanner remained optimistic about the progress. They reached the Sheraton Hotel, and Tanner insisted on taking her to dinner that night. He picked her up at 7 o'clock, and they went to a local establishment, Kyoki's Paradise. She was in a good mood, he was in a good mood, and apparently the tropical drinks were flowing by the river. Tanner started talking about the good old days. After dinner, they strolled along the beach in front of the Sheraton Hotel, shoes off. Tanner continued to reminisce about their past relationship. Anna said she was tipsy, happy, and discussing her high school days with Tanner made her feel young. Tanner insisted on a late-night cocktail and asked her to show him her room. That night, he entertained her. And then Anna said she knew it was so wrong, but at the same time she thought, since I'll never know, it'll just be an affair. She would put it out of her mind and never talk about it again. According to her, they kept in touch while she was on Kauai. Max, please don't ruin our lives over something as trivial as sex. He means nothing to me. Tanner means nothing to me. I'll do whatever you want me to do. Please, I'm begging you. Please at least think about it, she begged. I agreed to think about it. The next day, I served her with a divorce petition. The thing is, that night, after leaving Anna at Coffee Clutch, I did think about it. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I finally realized that no matter what, I could never fully trust her again. I couldn't live like that. She called me, texted me, and finally came to the office when I didn't answer. She stormed into the office, angry at me for serving her. She said I promised to think about it. Why did I give up on our marriage? Do I have no compassion? Have I never made mistakes? And so on. I hardly spoke at all. Then she started talking about how I had ruined her business opportunities at CPL. Apparently, without her gardens, they were reviewing In the Garden with Anna. The gardens were supposed to be the backdrop. Without them, the appeal of the show was diminishing. My silence seemed to anger her. Then she claimed she was entitled to half of our property, including the house and land. Anna, this land is in a family trust. My Aunt Helen arranged it that way, I told her. Yet I took care of that property before you and I even got together. I consulted with my attorney. You have no rights to this property or anything in the trust, I told her. Now, if you don't mind, I have some more work to finish up. With those words, I tilted the computer screen toward me and started working. She sat for a minute, got up, walked out, and slammed the door as she left. It wasn't until 3 days later that Tanner showed up at my office. I thought he was still in Hawaii. I heard a commotion in the reception area where Yasmin was sitting. Before I could investigate, Tanner burst into my office. Get out, I said to him, pointing to the exit. Max, give me a minute. I've earned it. I need to talk to you, not S. And he pointed his thumb to where Yasmin was now standing. I was pissed, but I was also wondering what he would say about his financial situation and contact with Anna. I need you to settle this lawsuit, he told me with a desperation I'd never seen in Max before. I'm running out of time with the real estate in Hawaii. I need the money from the Wine Village house to finish the beach house. He spoke incoherently. I pondered his words. It sounded like he had mortgaged the Wine Village house to buy a lot on Kauai. Then he took out a mortgage on Wine Country to finish the country house. Then he mortgaged the lot on Kauai to get materials to build a house on the shore, or something like that. He ended up with a bunch of borrowed money, and he owed Sydney Winegrass a shore house. First of all, I told him, instead of spending time in Hawaii, you should have paid your insurance premium. Second of all, I don't control the claims. The guarantor decides whether a claim is valid. I don't. I'm just an agent. Third, I doubt you'll be reimbursed for the claim. Your policy was canceled for lack of payment. Finally, get out of here. I never want to see you again. I told him. Max, he started, and really turned on the charm. Look, the deal with Anna was nothing. It was just for old time's sake. It didn't mean anything. She loves you. You're all she talks about. He was really pouring in. I interrupted him. Get out, growled I. Finally, he walked away. I thought about what he had done. I still couldn't keep track of all the loans and mortgages, but one thing I knew for sure. He was in deep shit with Sydney Winegrass, not the kind of man I wanted to have a bad relationship with. For the next week or two, life went on as usual. Greg Boston was turning Aunt Helen's old property into what was going to be a neighborhood at some point. My father was getting better too. Anna had gotten an attorney and our lawyers were dealing with the property, gradually unraveling the financial components of our marriage. The emotional component was like a dark cloud that engulfed me. When surrounded by other people, I tried to stay upbeat and positive. But when I was alone, it was very difficult. I had dark thoughts, mostly about Tanner and Anna. I decided to see a psychologist. Gradually, faint glimmers began to appear in my life, bringing me closer to positivity. One evening, a few weeks after my last encounter with Tanner, I met up with a couple of friends for drinks and food at a casual restaurant outside of town. Heading towards the dark parking lot, I began to think that maybe my life would become normal again. As I approached my car, I noticed several people near where I parked. Two large men seemed to be idling near my car. A black Chrysler 300 with custom wheels was parked nearby. As I moved to get into the car, two guys approached me. "Hey, what?" I said as each of them grabbed my arm. "Hey, buddy," I heard, and when I turned around, I saw Michael Ameche walking towards me. "Mr. Winegrass wants to talk to you, buddy," Ameche said. "He can make an appointment for me in the morning. I'm done for the day," I replied to Ameche. With those words, I started struggling to free myself from the two thugs. Their grip was getting tighter and tighter. While I was squirming, Ameche, the freak, came up and punched me from behind in the face. For a moment, as blood flowed from my lip, I was stunned. "Mr. Winegrass wants to see you," he informed me. "Guys, put him in the back seat," he ordered the thugs. This wasn't real. I was being kidnapped. I was sure Winegrass was digging into his deal with Tanner and somehow thought I had something to do with it. I was sure I could explain my lack of involvement, but it all seemed so rude. I couldn't ignore the fear I was feeling. Our destination was an old building in an industrial part of downtown, not far from the docks. The place was deserted at this time of day. There were no interested observers to come to my aid. I was dragged into a dark basement. I noticed that the egress windows were boarded up. There was a musty odor, and water dripped down the stone walls in places. Soon, I noticed something else. Tanner was sitting on a wooden chair in the shade. He looked a little shabby, and there was a look of desperation in his cloaked face. It was a far cry from the confidence he usually displayed. Ameche and one of the thugs left after I was duct-taped to the same chair. One guy silently stayed with us in this gloomy dungeon. Soon, Ameche and the other asshole returned. "Mr. Winegrass is delayed. He'll be here soon," Ameche told us. "In the meantime, buddy, you and I have unfinished business." He looked at me intently. "Remember when you messed up my leg?" he asked. I remained silent. "It's time for revenge," he told me. And with those words, Michael Ameche beat me as I sat tied to a chair. He punched me in the face over and over again. I knew I had lost teeth and probably broken my nose. I may have passed out. My eyes turned into slits because of the swelling. He seemed to be taking great pleasure in what was happening. Fortunately, Ameche's cell phone rang. "Mr. Winegrass is on his way," he said, wiping the blood off his hands with a rag. The three of them went upstairs to wait. Max, Tanner whispered to me. "Winegrass needs the money. We have to stick together. I can find $500,000 to pay him off. Can you get $1 million? I think we can work out a deal, but we need to stick together. Okay, Max?" With my injuries, it was hard to speak. At that moment, Amechi, the two thugs, and Sidney Winegrass came down the stairs. Winegrass was dressed in a tailored black suit, a white shirt, and a knotted red tie. Winegrass was thin, with back-combed dark hair slicked back over his forehead. His appearance was reminiscent of a lupine. "Michael, turn on the lights," he ordered. "I want to see what I'm dealing with." Amechi quickly turned on the single overhead light. Winegrass, with his hands clasped behind his back, walked around the basement, circling us and studying Tanner and me. "Sid, Mr. Winegrass," Tanner began, "as soon as I get the insurance money, I can pay you back. I need Max to approve it. He should have gotten the check from my office." He talked nonstop. So much for keeping us together. Putting his hands behind his back, Winegrass turned to us. "Gentlemen, I am an honest businessman. I try to find a deal that satisfies all parties. I believe that's the best way to do business. Everyone gets his beak," he continued. "But I never want to show weakness. When you, as a businessman, show weakness, your partners, your competitors, even those you thought were friends, will try to take advantage of you. I can't do business that way," he explained. "So, Mr. Bishop," he turned to Tanner, "we agreed that you would build me a beautiful home in Hawaii. I like the idea of a house in a tropical place. I give you the money, and you spend it on finishing some other house, and then that house burns down, and you tell me you don't have insurance? Is that true?" he asks. Tanner rambles something about the insurance company, about how I should have gotten a check and straightened everything out, and so on. In his desperation, he doesn't give it a second thought. Winegrass clapped his hands, calling for silence. "Mr. Early," he nodded in my direction, "as an insurance agent, you must take care of your client, Mr. Bishop." Now he nodded toward Tanner. "And Mr. Bishop claims it's your fault that he's uninsured. And now Mr. Bishop has filed for bankruptcy. And I don't have the tropical home I paid for. I ask you both, is that fair?" He looks at Tanner and at me. Tanner immediately starts his story about how I should have picked up the check, that it wasn't his fault, and so on. I can see that Winegrass is starting to get angry. The more Tanner makes excuses, the angrier he gets. Finally, he turns to Ameche. "Get rid of both of them," and heads for the stairs. Tanner loses his temper, struggling and making excuses that it wasn't his fault. Winegrass continues toward the stairs, and the thugs head toward Tanner and me. "Mr. Winegrass," I say, "it's the first time I've spoken, and I'm having trouble getting the words out with my battered face. Can I ask you a question?" He stops and partially turns to me. He nods as if to say, "Go ahead." "As a businessman, you have insured your assets, including your property, I suspect," I say. Winegrass doesn't answer, but listens. I ask you, does your insurance agent come to your office to collect a check for the premium? Or do you, yourself or someone in your office, mail it when it's due? He looks at me. Tanner starts to interrupt, but is told to shut up. "And one more question," I say. "If you have a tenant who rents a property from you and he doesn't pay when he's supposed to, is that your fault?" He starts nodding affirmatively, as if he understands my point. "If you'll excuse me and loosen one hand, I want to show you something else." He nods to the first thug to cut the duct tape. I reach into my pocket and carefully pull out my iPhone. I hold it out to the bandit. "The bonus was due October 15th, I say, and Winegrass is already studying my iPhone. As you can see, I sent him text messages reminding him of the premiums on October 6th, 8th, and 13th. If you look at my sent emails, you'll see that I sent him a text message on October 9th and also on the 11th. You will see in my emails that I re-emphasize the importance of payment," I tell him. Winegrass scrutinizes what I assume are my letters to Tanner. "I agree with you," I say to Winegrass. "Part of my job is to take care of my clients. In my opinion, if I contact them 5 times during the week, the client will have ample opportunity to pay for the services I provide. I believe that's fair. Don't you? I ask. At this, he looks away and nods his head, tapping his compressed lips with his index finger. For a moment, he becomes thoughtful. Finally, he turns to Ameche. Michael, take Mr. Rano to his car, he says to Ameche. And Mr. Rano, not a word about this to anyone. Please know that I know where you live, where you work, and I know people close to you. Do I make myself clear? He asks. I nod silently in agreement. As much as I'd like to report this, I don't want to spend the rest of my life worrying and looking over my shoulder. When Ameche and I leave, Tanner goes crazy, begging me to save him. I don't feel any remorse. Max, please, is the last thing I hear as Ameche and I leave this dank basement. On the way home, Ameche tries to be friendly. Hey, no hard feelings, buddy. Business is business, he says with a fake smirk. I don't say anything back. After a moment, he continues. I think we can get even. You broke my leg. I messed up your face a little. The fake smirk again. I'm silent the whole way through. Ameche refuses to make small talk. On the one hand, I am greatly relieved that I will not suffer Tanner's fate. On the other hand, I never liked Ameche, and he took great pleasure in beating me up. Getting out of the car, Ameche leans back in his seat and says to me through the open passenger door, Remember what Mr. Winegrass said, he tells me. Not a word about this. I look at Ameche and give him a brief nod. Looking at him, I thought, I don't know where or when, but I will have my revenge. Many months later, the sun pleased me as I gazed at the blue water of my pool. Part of my negotiations with Greg Boston, my builder friend who was developing the site, was for my own residence. I took a half-acre with a south-facing backyard on the most elevated lot. He designed a beautiful mid-century modern, single-level home with a resort-like backyard and a lovely pool. The divorce was complicated. My lawyer did a good job of making sure I didn't have to share the proceeds of Aunt Helen's inheritance with Anna. And she, of course, tried to get a piece of it. I ended up having to write her a check, but it was a lot less than she asked for. From what I hear, she's still bitter about it. My thoughts, as they often do, return to our relationship. For some reason, I was reflecting on that evening when Anna, Tanner, and I sat and discussed our individual dreams. As it turned out, neither of us got what we wanted. Tanner wanted to be rich, Anna wanted to be famous, and I just wanted a quiet life with my business and wife. Tanner wasn't rich, and it was unlikely he was even alive. Anna, at least for the moment, was not famous. The opportunity to work with K-Pal was gone. One thing I remember from our reflections was that I said I would never be rich. I was wrong about that too. After selling real estate, I quickly became a multimillionaire, and of course, I didn't have the peaceful existence with my wife that I wanted at that moment. It bothered me at times, but I had already come to terms with my bachelor life. At that moment, I looked up and saw my new topless girlfriend emerge from the far end of the pool. Water was running down her pointy nipples. I smiled. Max, young Brittany asked, can you put some sunscreen on me? Yes, I smiled. I make a pretty good bachelor. Epilogue? The atmosphere in the ballroom was lively. Everyone was dressed in exquisite evening gowns. My companion, Kai, was stunning in a black miniskirt. There were dozens of round tables all around the hall. The annual Children's Charity Ball was one of the major social events of the year. At the far end of the hall, I saw Sydney Winegrass with an attractive woman who was at least 10 years younger than him. I decided to walk over to his table and shake his hand. He didn't recognize me at first. The last time he saw me, I was a bloody mess. Upon recognizing me, he was gracious in his refined manners. I had just established my alibi. I walked away quickly. As I turned and walked back to my table and Kai in his miniskirt, a shiver ran down my spine. I needed to wash my hands. That same night in another part of town, Michael Ameche left a bar downtown, probably having had an extra drink while driving. He went into the garage and started looking for his keys. He noticed that this corner of the garage was darker than usual. He also noticed a short, swarthy man, his face obscured by the darkness, leaning against the front fender of his Chrysler. "Chief, move over," he said to the man. With those words, the man stood up and stared at Ameche. At that moment, two more men appeared from the shadows. The first blow was like the strike of a whip. The smaller man struck a lightning-fast blow, then another and another. Amechi didn't stand a chance. As the first man continued to kick the lifeless Amechi, one of his companions whispered quietly, "Angel, vamanos, we have to go." The end. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch for the next video.